Hi angels. A little while ago, after I did my spiritual diets video, a few people asked me if I could please make a video which addressed negative cycles to do with food. For example, eating when you're not hungry, feeling like you're constantly hungry, consistently making very unhealthy food choices and then regretting them, but kind of being unable to get off of that carousel. And I thought at first that I wasn't going to go ahead with this video because I'm not sure it's entirely in my remit. I do have a lot of advice to give and a lot of opinions and a lot of kind of points of view about food and health and dieting and well-being and things, but you know, it's not something I would say I'm an expert on. And I would say that a lot of my viewpoints come from the fact that I suffered with an eating disorder, and I kind of now do see a lot of the damaging messages that are put out in the media, and I see a lot of the harmful limiting beliefs that women go through when they go through these cycles, and I feel like it's almost a sense of hyper-awareness. My eating disorder was to do with hardcore restriction of food and constant weighing and things like that. I'm not going to be talking about my disorder in the context of this video. This is for people that feel like they're in an unhealthy cycle with food and they're not really sure where to start with reversing that and helping themselves to get through that. It's also for people who have tried diets over and over again and found that maybe they had great instantaneous results and then they fell off the bandwagon, or maybe they didn't see results at all, maybe they just found it really difficult to stick with. I would say the most widespread experience that I hear about, particularly from women, is with regard to diets that start off going really well and kind of give those instantaneous results and really kind of lift the person up, and then suddenly out of nowhere it all comes crashing down and the negative cycles come back and they don't quite understand why. So I would say that's a very common experience. So I would like to honour the requests of the few people who did ask me to speak on this subject. As I said, I'm not going to talk about anything necessarily to do with an eating disorder, which I feel is a very different thing and is characterised by slightly different behaviours and slightly different thought patterns. But certainly, you know, a lot of people experience a lot of pain and a lot of frustration when it comes to being unable to get into a healthy relationship with food. And it's really those people that I'm addressing with this video, and I hope that I can be of some help to you. I am going to make another video which I intend to have some thoughts placed into it on my recovery from my eating disorder and potentially also from my self-harm. And I will talk in the course of that video potentially about people with eating disorders, recovering from eating disorders, and kind of give you guys some advice too. But for the purposes of this video, that's not going to be part of the content. I just wanted to talk about some pieces of advice that I could posit to people that struggle with their relationship with food and find that they consistently make unhealthy choices, or they eat, you know, far more than they would ever need and kind of don't really understand why. First of all, I would say make meals into meditations, and this is something that I did talk about in the spiritual diets video. I think it's really important to unplug. That's something that we really don't do a lot when we're eating. Not completely, not entirely. We tend to leave the TV on or have our phone by our side, or even just be thinking about something else, be thinking about finishing so we can get back on with something else. And I think that a lot of the time it just helps to spend time eating your meal and just considering eating your meal, you know, practice mindfulness, be in the moment and really just experience it. Eating can be an experiential thing in a positive way, not just in a negative way. I think a lot of people eat to try and stimulate certain positive emotions because they feel they can't get them any other way, and that's kind of like the negative form of experiential eating that I think I'm talking about. But there can be this positive, mindful, in the moment, being present, just showing up for this moment that you're having. Frog in my throat. This moment that you're having with your food, and I think that's something that's lost. I think that more people need to unplug and more people need to show up for the eating experience. And the thing that this does to your mindset when you start unplugging, when you start spending sacred time just mindfully eating and not doing anything else and not looking at a screen or anything like that, what happens is that you actually give yourself a greater connection to yourself and a greater sense of self-awareness, and this means that you are far less likely to end up in a negative cycle, a negative eating cycle, or picking up something that you really don't want to eat, picking up something that you know does not nurture you and is going to make you feel like crap. The reason for this is that you kind of need to create a disconnect in your mind to start doing those things to begin with. I mean, think about it, it really is a form of enforced cognitive dissonance. You say over and over again that you know over and over again that this food doesn't fulfill you, or that you don't want that much food, and yet over and over again you consistently reach for those foods or consume too much food. So that it really is an enforced, kind of subconsciously contrived cognitive dissonance that you're holding on to, and you need to create a mental disconnect in order to do that. You know, that's kind of the whole definition of cognitive dissonance. When these two things kind of occur simultaneously, there needs to be this middle part which is hazy, which you don't address, because otherwise you would recognise that these two things are in direct conflict and you need to do something about it consciously. So when you introduce mindfulness to meal times and you make meals into meditations, it's almost like you are showing up to be with yourself. You're not having this out-of-body experience where you eat like 4 cookies or whatever your poison is, and then you come back to yourself and think, I didn't want that, what the hell was I doing? That wasn't on the agenda, that wasn't part of my plan. When you practice mindfulness, you are showing up, you are there in the moment all the time, in the unfolding moment. You don't leave yourself, you don't abandon yourself willingly so you can go and do something you don't really want to do but you really crave to do, and then kind of jump back into your body and think, oh crap, I've done that again, I didn't want to do that. You know, when you are practicing mindfulness and you are treating meals like meditations, you are there, you are showing up, and you can be aware of things like the level of your hunger, for example, and the taste that you're experiencing, and just being there in that moment, because consuming food to nourish the body is a sacred thing. It is something that can be turned into a meditation, no doubt. And practice deep gratitude. I know a lot of you probably already practice some form of gratitude before you chow down, and I think that's cool. But I think deep gratitude is this, it's a really visceral place within you where you actually allow yourself to envision where this food came from. Think about it from its inception. Think about its life in every form and in every way before it got to you. Imagine it making its way to you from somewhere. Imagine, you know, what the people must have had to do to get it to you in this shape, in this form, right now being eaten. I would say that's a practice of deep gratitude, where you actually really consider the effort that's gone into having this thing on your plate, whatever it is, and you really consider the journey that your food has taken to get to you, and that kind of brings on this whole new feeling of blessing, which is actually much more profound in many cases. So I would really recommend that too, and I would recommend that you kind of use that a little bit like a silent prayer before you eat. That can be a really good one for people who kind of like, you know, eat on autopilot, or eat quickly, or eat with something else in mind, or eat with their tablet device there, or whatever. If you feel like you maintain an unhealthy relationship with food, it's because you're not really there with the food, and you're trying not to be there with the food because you don't want to be. But actually, the more you're there, the more you're thinking about where it's come from, how it's made its way to you, and all of that good stuff, the more you will realise that your mentality towards what you're doing with food will change. I really believe that hunger is the key, okay? If you have an unhealthy relationship with food, if you struggle with eating what you feel you want to eat instead of what you kind of want in the moment, if you struggle with eating too much, if you feel like you're always hungry, hunger is the absolute key to everything that you're going to be doing to right your diet and to eat in a more healthy, more conscious way, I think. Because, you know, craving and hunger very, very often seem to be the same thing. Craving disguises itself as hunger a hell of a lot, and it's hugely confusing for people. A lot of the time, craving can come from things like having a past memory of eating that food, smelling some sort of food, tasting some sort of food, seeing an image on TV or on a billboard or on a poster of some kind of food. That kind of stuff can create what I would call craving. So basically it's got nothing to do with you checking in with your body, checking in with your stomach, working out if the hunger is coming from down here. It's kind of produced a craving effect. And that craving is very powerful, it's very emotionally potent, and it seems like hunger because you really want to consume, and yet it's not hunger, and at no point have you actually checked in with your body to see if you are hungry. The same with things like using food to feel better about yourself, using food to try and kind of like release some dopamine, that kind of stuff, serotonin. Again, when you feel that when you consume a certain type of food, you're going to feel all of these good emotions, obviously that isn't a state of eating because you are hungry, that is a state of eating because of some kind of emotional craving. And the only reason that you should be eating normally, aside from, you know, like odd occasions, because I don't want to be too militant about this, I think that's really important. Obviously, sometimes one just has a fancy for something, but I can honestly say in my own life that at this point, I very rarely eat unless my body tells me it's time to eat, and I feel, you know, really, really good with that. I feel good with that. I feel like my energy releases how it needs to and at the speed that it needs to, and so on. So what I would say is that your eating should be in alignment with how you feel down here, with your hunger, with hunger pangs, and with kind of like that feeling of being lightheaded or of not quite being of this world, you know, in Spirited Away, where she has to eat some food unless she kind of fades away, that kind of stuff. And it kicks in organically, and if you don't normally listen to your hunger response because you're actually coming from a place of craving and coming from a place of allowing your mind to dictate what you want, then it might take a while to get back into having a decent relationship with your actual feelings of physical hunger. But it is so worth trying to implement that, it really is. I really think that hunger is the key for a lot of people, that they need to actually attune and get back into alignment with their feeling, with their physical message, their physical alarm bell of, oh, now it's time to eat. And when you're actually more in alignment with that than you are with what your mind wants and with this kind of craving side of things, then you will very quickly realise when a craving is coming into effect, and you can quickly check in with yourself, and you can do what I like to call the hunger spectrum, where you actually figure out on a scale of 1 to 10 how physically hungry you are. You can think about the last time you ate if you want to, and you can think about what you ate and how much energy you've exerted since then. But really the purest form of trying to work out whether or not you're hungry is actually to check in, have that mind-body connection, actually you can feel what your stomach is doing. You can feel whether or not it's growling. You can feel all these kinds of things. You can feel whether or not you need more fuel in the tank. And at first it might be difficult and it might feel abstract, because if you spent a long time not allowing hunger to do the dictating for you as to what you do and don't put into your body, then at first it is going to feel alien. But just keep thinking to yourself, it shouldn't feel alien. It should feel like the most organic and the most natural thing in the world, to actually attune with my feelings of hunger rather than attune with my feelings of craving. That's the way it should be. Hunger's the way it should be. You know, you should be listening to your body's responses. So keep trying and keep doing it, and you will realise that there is a very big difference between craving and hunger, and that you've been managing to convince yourself for probably a long ass time that your craving was hunger. And I think this is why a lot of people say things like, I'm always hungry. There are certain medical conditions and states of being which actually induce hunger no matter what the situation is that's going on. But for the vast majority of people who complain that they're always hungry and they always need to consume and they don't feel very good about that, it's normally the case that craving and hunger have been completely mixed up. And there needs to be that separation there, there needs to be that understanding. I would also say rediscover your sense of taste. I know that sounds really stupid, but I really feel that sometimes the sense of taste can be very much taken for granted, and actually we don't realise what an incredibly visceral sense it is, how incredibly poetic it is, how rich and dynamic it is, and how many different ways we can actually experience it with food, and try and attach it to like adjectives, and try and attach it to different forms of experience that don't have anything to do with the food we're eating, but that tap us into these deeper considerations. And that can actually be quite exciting. I think rediscovering your sense of taste and actually really thinking about everything that goes over your tongue from the plate can actually put the excitement back into the experience of eating again, and it slows you down. It slows you down, it gives you those mindful considerations, and it allows you to do what in positive psychology we would call savouring. Savouring is kind of like mindfulness, except you zoom in on a certain part of the experience and you really amplify that part of the experience, and you really kind of go there and immerse yourself in just that one piece of the puzzle. That's savouring. And you are literally and figuratively savouring when you rediscover your sense of taste, and when you really think about what things taste like and how you can describe that and how you really feel about that. And you might notice when you rediscover your sense of taste as well that you don't actually like things that you thought you liked all that much. That's a really interesting thing, and that you do actually like things that you suspected you might not like, so that's really cool. Also, I just want to say briefly, for those of you who are kind of really in a cycle which is to do with sugary processed foods, that kind of thing, when you start trying to cut down on them and put in more fruit, the fruit is not going to taste that sweet. Okay, I've had this experience myself when I got into a very unhealthy relationship with Ribbon Saucy Knick Knack. Was it Ribbon Saucy? Or Nice and Spicy? I don't know. Some crisps that we get here in the UK that are delicious. I got into a bit of a cycle with that and picking that instead of like a kiwi or whatever, and I would eat like little Bueno. This isn't about me. Anyway, I got into a little cycle of that, and I remember when I stopped that, when I kind of caught myself in the act of doing that, and I was like, oh, I'm back to eating clean, this can't go on. Fruit didn't really have that exciting, like, zingy, zangy, zesty, oh yeah, it didn't really have that anymore, because I've been really kind of getting into this processed sugar that is sort of a very quick, very direct, almost kind of, a brash, abrasive sweetness, which really has nothing to do with what comes out of Mother Earth. So it took me a while to get back into kind of experiencing a bowl of kiwis and strawberries and thinking, God damn, this is gorgeous. Oh, it's lush. Like, I didn't have that for a while after the little sojourn into eating not so clean. So I just want to make you aware of that rediscovering your sense of taste when you are making a conscious effort to change your dietary choices is going to be challenging for you, and it is going to be something that you need to move back into, that you need to recognise that after 7 days of replacing your naughty sugary snacks with pieces of fruit, that fruit is going to taste like the best thing you ever had in your life, believe me. Media messages, I want to talk about them. I want to talk about how you respond to them. I want to talk about whether or not you actually see them. But I don't have all night. I'm going to admit I'm on a little bit of a timeline. So what I want to say is this. The media, the advertising world, the cosmetics industry, the weight loss industry itself, and all manner of other industries, from, you know, things to make you smell nice to things to help you clean your teeth, whatever, they all kind of know about these hang-ups and these insecurities that people have, and they all know how to ride on that stuff, and they all know how to get money out of you because of that stuff. There are certain industries like the fashion industry and the beauty industry that are really pumping out some very harmful messages, and actually some very untruthful messages, and messages that are now thankfully being hung, drawn and cauterized, being dissected, being analysed, being looked at, and we are being given a chance to see in a way that wasn't available to people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, the face behind fashion and the face behind beauty, how everything is done, how everything fits together, how Photoshop is used, the whole shebang. So we're actually at a very fortunate time in our history, I think, particularly as women, you know, particularly in relation to women and the sheer amount of messages that they receive on a daily basis, which kind of try to program them and condition them into how they think and feel about their body. We are at a kind of a tipping point in history, I would say, because I speak to a lot of women and men who back in the 60s, 70s, kind of just felt like it was an impenetrable world and everybody was just so perfect, and it almost felt like the hierarchy, the distance between them and kind of these film stars or models or whatever was just, it was so great. But then in other ways we're kind of screwing ourselves over too. I mean, the way that we perceive beauty in terms of, you know, what kind of woman looks good in clothes, etc., that kind of stuff. This is a whole other video. My point is, you are responsible for understanding what media messages do to you. If you are picking up magazines which kind of on the front cover slate a woman for being too big, and then on the third page slate a woman for looking anorexic or like she's starving herself, okay, you are not absorbing decent messages whatsoever. It's only at the point where you can look at that magazine and understand what's happening there, and understand this sick little carousel that's going on, and know that you don't want to be a part of it. That's the point where you can be around those messages without kind of checking in with yourself every 2 minutes and saying, we don't need to believe this isn't what we want for our life. There are heinous messages, odious messages absolutely everywhere, and it is your job to check it out, listen to your emotional response to those messages, make a firm decision about what you read and don't read, make a firm decision about the proximity that you want between you and messages which are trying to convince you that there is a perfect way to be. I think this is very important, and that's as far as I can go with it for now, because otherwise I'm just going to get sucked into this massive long thing. But the other thing I wanted to say was that dissecting the messages and understanding what's kind of happening on all sides of you and what you're absorbing all the time and how it's making you feel, that is part of your responsibility to yourself. But the other part of your responsibility to yourself is not using that as an excuse to carry on with any behaviours that you feel are negative or that you feel are not serving you. I think that's really the other side of the coin. I think if you go into victimhood or blame gaming, then you are actually consistently making yourself a victim. You already feel like a victim because you have all of these messages around you of, you know, body types that you can't live up to, and ideas about how you should be, and, you know, ideas about what the bikini body is. I'll tell you how you get a bikini body. You put your body in a bikini. That's how it is. Anyway, so you've got all of these messages. You already feel very victimised. You already feel very, like, attacked and very under pressure and very as though you need to do something, you need to make something happen. Then on top of that, you are going to use the messages to actually give you an excuse not to take responsibility for what you've just realised about those messages. And that is the key, is not to go into victimhood. Don't use those messages as an excuse to stay where you are, because that's where real victimhood lies. You know, the media will always be there, advertising will always be there, models will always be 20 foot on a billboard, pixelated with their limbs lengthened and their skin perfected and all of that stuff, and you know it's not real, and I know it's not real. But those messages will always be there. You know, there's nothing necessarily that you can do about them. You know, that there'll always be certain parts of the advertising world and certain industries that are going to use what they know about what goes on in there, and they're going to ride on that, and they're in many ways going to also be responsible for it where it wasn't even there before. But that is not an excuse to drop anchor at realising that the messages are heinous. You also need to realise that you're responsible for giving yourself better messages, for putting yourself in touch with better resources, for reading, you know, more intellectually stimulating and self-love promoting blogs, magazines, whatever. I think that's so important, so I just wanted to put that out there. It's also obviously important to look at your conditioning and programming from childhood and adolescence. Sometimes we're not given the most helpful messages by our own parents, and again, this is not about blaming, and this is not about shaming or anything else of that nature. This is about you having a handle on some of the root causes and having a handle on some of the ways that these messages got into your own mind. If you saw your mother or father kind of doing things with their own diet that kind of seemed like restrictive or in keeping with self-loathing, you wouldn't have known it at the time, but you would have picked up on it. Believe me, children pick up on everything. And then as you went through your adolescence, you need to think, what were the messages that I was being exposed to, and what were adults kind of you know, communicating to me about what was okay to do with diet, and about what was okay to do with restricting food, and what was okay to do with eating food, etc. So that's something, and I think it just gives you a clearer handle on where to start and how to clear the debris so that you can build something more kind of helpful for yourself and more in keeping with what you really want. So a few other brief notes. Firstly, know that what you get out is what you put in. This is very important, okay? If you consume something that you know has no nutritional value and that you know is not going to help your body in any way and has nothing that your body can take from, then you must also know that those things that you already suspect in your mind to be true are going to happen. If you put stuff into your body that is nutritious and that has stuff that your body can use, then you are going to have more energy, you are going to feel more revitalised, you are going to feel more able to handle more stuff and be awake for longer and whatnot. Your mood is going to be elevated, all of that stuff. So I would just make that very simple equation in your head right now and know that each time you're choosing something that your body can't use and can't process, then you are choosing to have maybe a less high vibration. You're choosing to risk getting into a low mood or losing your temper. You're choosing to have less energy for the things you want to do during the day. And that's something that I've had to get clear on a few times when I've slipped into kind of like bad snacking and stuff. That's the thing that's really pulled me out of it, is I look at how much energy I have, I look at how kind of alive I feel, and I know that I could do better. I know that if I had, you know, replaced that snack with this snack yesterday, I would have had more vitality, I would have felt better. So I think that's a very simple equation that you can constantly be thinking about and put it into practice right now. Even just saying to yourself, what I pick up for my next meal will dictate how much energy I have, how good I feel, how much service I can be in, how much good I can give to the world. It will dictate you know, my relationship to my art and my relationship to my friends. I know it seems extreme, but when you boil it down on a small scale, it is very true that what you put into your body is what you get out of your body. And when you're expecting something from your body, when you're expecting, you know, high performance and high speed and high power from your body, when you put nothing decent in the tank, that's not a good thing. You know, that's not something that you can justify. You need to take accountability for that. And actually, I'll link below to a video that Charlie Says Go recently did about her journey towards eating clean. It's quite a long video, but it's well worth watching if anything that I'm saying here is interesting you. I found it really interesting, and it was really nice to hear about her experiences actually. Give yourself manageable goals. I would say this is really important. I would say that going gung-ho into a new dietary practice whereby you cut out whole food groups that you used to love before, or you kind of want to go from being a meat eater to being a hardcore raw vegan in one easy step, this stuff is just going to make you self-sabotage. It's going to make you dig your heels in, and it's going to give you all the excuses you need for why you couldn't do it. You know, you're going to go around saying it was too hard, it was too much. It was too hard, it was too much. It is kind of unrealistic and untenable to expect yourself to make a change that drastic in such a short space of time. Definitely, yeah, it was too hard and it was too much, but that's on you because you set the goal in the first place. You know what I mean? So you have to always be thinking about that. I would suggest small, manageable goals, realistic goals, decent daily aims or weekly aims that you know you can tick off, that you know are going to be just allowing you to dance on the edge of your comfort zone, but not to the extent where you're going to completely freak yourself out and then run back into your shell and hide. You know, it's really important to recognise that a lot of the goals you give yourself, if they are unmanageable, if they were unrealistic, if you do go back to the drawing board, if you do have to start again, that's not the goal's fault, it's the maker of the goal's fault. So that's really important to think about. I would say I notice a lot of women talking about their ideal weight rather than their optimum weight, and I think this is something that I discussed when I first got with my boyfriend, who also suffered from an eating disorder for a long time before he met me. He had a nutritionist and he went through a period of recovery. I might ask him if he would talk about it on the channel with me actually. And he said that his nutritionist told him that people regularly talk about their ideal weight, about the weight that they want to get to. And actually this is not said or thought with the body in mind, because the body doesn't have necessarily any correlation to your ideal weight. Your body has what nutritionists would call an optimum weight. Now, I'm not 100% sure what my personal take is on the optimum weight, but the way I understand it is that it is a range of health, which is not to do with your height and weight, which is the BMI thing, which I think needs to be thrown out of the window. It should have been thrown out of the window yesterday, and I'm hoping it gets thrown out tomorrow. Fortunately, in the UK, doctors are becoming more and more wise to the fact that the BMI scale is absolutely, it's shot to shit. There's no other way of saying it. It's ridiculous, and it's going out of vogue, which I think is a really good thing. I think the parameters are just way too narrow, and it's just ridiculous. But with the optimum weight, which nutritionists use, they're basically looking at a place that you tend to level out weight-wise once you are getting all of the nutritional value you need and eating in a healthy way. And that place where you level out, that's your optimum weight range. So being at the weight you are now and like plucking a number out of the air and deciding that that's your ideal weight, and that's the weight that you want to get to, and that's the weight that you're aiming for, that's actually not self-loving, and that's not done with the body in mind and with what the body needs in mind. Actually, what you need to do is abandon the idea of a goal weight or an ideal weight, which I know seems really hard, but stick with me. What I would do is, instead of thinking about a number at all, I would think purely about nutritional value, about cleaning up the diet, about getting things clean with your snacks, your meals, drinking more water, that kind of thing. Then when you've been doing that for a while, when you've been replacing processed foods with fruit, when you've been doing this kind of thing and making yourself feel better and more healthy, then you can take a look at where you've leveled out and how much you've lost. There's nothing wrong with actually noticing how much weight you've lost, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to lose weight, but you've got to come at it in the right way. And I really think that any system which asks you what your ideal weight is first is kind of fucked. That's my opinion. Take it or leave it. It's about optimum weight, it's about your optimum weight range, and you're not going to know that until you start eating healthy and putting good stuff into practice first. And the other thing that I really wanted to say was, a lot of people who start with a goal weight in mind, start with an ideal weight in mind, a lot of the time that weight is actually very similar or right on the money to the weight that they were before they started putting on weight and before they started, you know, before their food control issues got out of hand. What I want to say is this, if you found that at a certain point in your life you started to develop these unhealthy eating habits and you put on loads of weight and you're now not happy with your body, and you actually hark back to that former time when you were that weight that you were before all of this stuff got out of control, I would urge you not to put too much emphasis on that number. Don't put too much emphasis on that pair of jeans that you used to be able to fit into that you can't anymore. And the reason that I say that is because normally weight gain, which comes on quite quickly, or negative food habits which spiral out of all control and end up making you a weight that is kind of quite a long way away from where you were when the problem started, is normally the result of depression, a mental health issue, some kind of trauma, a horrible breakup, a move that didn't go right, something like that, some kind of life event or kind of mental health knife edge or financial issue, something which actually foisted you into a relationship with food that was not healthy, where you felt like you were getting something emotional out of the equation. And so when you look back at that weight that you were before all of that stuff happened and you try and hark back to it, every time you start losing weight and every time you start approaching that goal weight, that, you know, perfect weight that you were before, you'll freak yourself out and you'll self-sabotage. I really think this happens to a lot of people because you're triggered when you start going down to the weight that you were before. You're often unconsciously or subliminally reminded of the crappy stuff that happened to you when you were that weight. And then you start to eat to almost pad you out so you don't get hurt again, kind of thing. I really feel that's what it is. A lot of the time when you have that weight in mind, which you see as that perfect era in your past when everything was good before everything started going to shit with food, often you are trying to hark back to a time when you weighed a particular weight and something very bad happened, or something really uncomfortable happened, or something happened that made you start eating crap in the first place. So if you think you're in that category and you're kind of grabbing onto this ideal number or this ideal way of being where you can fit back into your clothes that you were wearing a few years ago or whatever, I would urge you to strike that from your sense of what's going on, because it's not helpful. And the more that you go down to that goal weight time after time, the more you will tend to self-sabotage when you reach it. What's really important to do, if you found that you are doing that, is to do some shadow work, do some release work, do some forgiveness work, open your chakras, whatever you've got to do to invite 100% pure healing with regard to that thing that happened that kind of propelled you into a negative relationship with food. It's got to start there. You've got to deal with the underlying causes. You've got to deal with those bad memories that stop you from kind of achieving weight loss in the way that you want to, because every time you get down to that weight, which reminds you of that past time, you pile it on again. So I would really suggest that if that is happening to you, and you know, listening to me now, that that is happening to you, then weight loss is definitely the wrong goal. Weight loss is always the wrong primary motivation anyway, I would say. But I'll go into that in a second. Weight loss is definitely the wrong goal if you find that that target weight has something to do with the weight that you were in the past, and whenever you reach that weight or get close to it, you panic and start eating massive bags of Doritos. If that happens, then it is definitely an emotional thing. It's an underlying emotional thing which is linked in with your memories of what happened to you when you were that weight, and I think you need to check that out first and get really real with yourself about that first. I wanted to talk just very briefly about dieting. I'm not going to get into this wholesale. I did bring it up a few thoughts about it when I was doing my spiritual diets video. At the end I kind of talked about my opinions about dieting in general, but I just wanted to say that I think diet culture has a hell of a lot to answer for. That's one thing I will say, and I could go on about this all day, but I already am kind of like reaching the end of the time that I have, but I genuinely could go on about this all day. I really think that a lot of people approach any kind of diet with this idea that once they've lost a certain amount of weight, they'll feel self-love. Like, self-love will kick in. You know, self-love is going to happen once I reach that weight that I want to be. I'm a recovered anorexic, and I just want to tell you right now that that is not true. That is not true. There was never any weight that I reached that made self-love kick in, and I was convinced that it would do. I had negative narcissistic reflexes like vanity and believing that anybody who told me I was too skinny was just jealous of me, but that has nothing to do with self-love. Believe me, self-love is not a number on the scale. It's not a number on the scale. It's not a magic door that's going to let it all leap into your heart. It doesn't work like that. Actually, many people will find time after time that the reason that they can't stick with their diet, the reason that the diet falls down flat, is because they haven't dealt with any of the stuff behind it. They don't have a solid foundation of self-love. They don't ask themselves why they crave these foods and what kind of emotional sustenance they get from it, because they don't get any physical from it. You know, they don't ask themselves those questions, and that's why they need to keep going back to dieting, and that's why their diets consistently fail. I also wanted to say that I find it a bit weird how so many people say, I'm on a diet. I'm on a diet at the moment. I'm on a diet. If that's you, try to think of your diet as not something that you're on, but your entire practice of eating and your entire manifesto with regard to eating across the board. If you are on a diet and you know that you can't actually sustain that diet, you can't prolong it because it's not realistic, it's not giving you enough nutrition or whatever, it's making you unhappy, then you are likely to say things like, I'm on a diet at the moment, which doesn't make any sense, right? Because one of the key reasons to diet is to lose weight, and if you say I'm on a diet at the moment, then it means that you're not really in it to win it, because you're not going to be on a diet in a while. You've already got the end point in mind, or you're already kind of accepting that the diet itself is ephemeral. Try to talk about your diet in general. Don't say I'm on a diet and my diet is going like this. Just say like my diet consists of, and try even to just talk in the present tense a lot more about, you know, the changes that you're trying to make with your diet, you know. Try not to say things like I'm on a diet. That's one thing that I would say, because I would say that that kind of implies that there's an end point, and you will believe that there's an end point. I think that happens to a lot of people. I think they start a diet directly because they want some kind of quick instantaneous results or some kind of rapid weight loss, and they don't actually think about sustaining it and, you know, being proactive about making healthy choices which are going to be for the long term. So I think that's another reason why diet culture is just a massive fail. It's a massive fail. I'm on a diet. Like, just think about how illogical that sentence is. I'm on a diet at the moment. But then think about all of your reasons, all of your motivations for going on a diet, and you would think that those motivations would key you into the fact that you don't actually want to come off of the diet. You want to create a nutritious, delicious, sustainable, healthy diet, and you want that to be your diet, your entire dietary practice, not just something that you do for a while to get some results, which will very quickly disintegrate after you come off of the diet. So I would say if women say I'm on a diet or men say I'm on a diet, I always think to myself, I don't think you're enjoying that diet much, because you're already looking for the end point. So you're either not in it for the right reasons or you're not in it to win it. So I would say just be aware of that mentality and be aware of how you absorb those messages if you're around them. And if you are trying to go in for a full-scale shift with regard to what you're eating and how and your mentality towards food, don't let those kinds of messages, those messages of like rapid weight loss and, you know, just diet for a week and you'll lose this much so you can fit into a dress at the Christmas party or whatever it is, don't let those messages absorb into you. This is something that you are doing for yourself for the long term. This is serious and deep root chakra work. You know, your root chakra is going to be activated in your sense of how you see the world, your sense of how you see your body, and your sense of how you want to continue for the rest of your life. So don't let those little messages get in the way, and I would really urge you to do that. And I would say, finally, just as a little kind of afterward, if you practice ritual, if you practice magic, if you practice manifestation, I would suggest that always remember that magic is like tipping the scales in your favour. You still need to do all of that material plane stuff, but magic is that little tip of the scales in your favour. Don't be afraid to use it for things like this. Don't get bogged down in that crap about low magic and high magic. No, if this is something that you really want to do, then, you know, practice ritual and magic, which is based around bringing positive energies to you and making you more self-aware and helping you to check in with yourself and building your strength and protecting you from negative thoughts and limiting beliefs, all that kind of stuff. You can do that and work it well and work it potently and work it with belief behind it, because I guarantee you that will be something else that's helpful for you to do. And that's about all for now. I'm sorry that this was so long, but there were obviously quite a few things that I thought it might be worthwhile to say. And if any of this is stuff that you struggle with, I hope something has hit you right between the eyes and allowed you to think for a little while about how you can improve your journey going forwards. And so much love to you guys. Blessed be.